I wanted to show this stuff off, man. I came across a little treasure trove of Disney Adventure magazines. Now, this is of an era, man. I don't know if y'all remember this. It was basically like TV Guide, but for kids. Disney Adventures, guys. TV Guide, but for like kids. Where it was like, here's a bunch of ads. Like, let's be honest, much like Nintendo Power, man. Like, this thing was a vehicle to advertise to your children. I got to admit, I kind of I miss going through the Canadian Tire catalog and the Sears catalog and like circling stuff for Christmas, right? That was so good. You want it like of an era, right? I'm sorry. Leslie Nielsen and Spy Hard, who was a fan of James and the Giant Peach, or I mean, like, come on now. Jim Carrey, would we all agree Ace Ventura, Jim Carrey in his prime? So these things were great, man. They had like edutainment stuff. So they'd tell you about, the tales of the man-eating tiger, and like you go tell you about some random like nature facts and stuff like that. For me, the stuff that always got me interested was the science stuff. It's like a little bit National Geographic, a little bit TV Guide, and then had these amazing series of comics. So they had this section, right? The Comic Zone. You would have a bunch of different ones. So Timon and Pumbaa, Darkwing Duck, and Junior's Comic Zone, right? So you'd have all these different ones. So if you like Timon and Pumbaa, you can get them in one magazine. And then, while learning about Elijah Wood's role in Flipper, which, I mean, come on, like, quintessential part of our childhood, we're flipping over Elijah. But no, you go into the back, and they have some... Oh, here we go. We got Goof Troop. Man, the classic. I know there are some fans of the Goof Troop out there. But you'd get these, right? And so, of course, the science stuff was definitely up my alley. But also, the video game stuff. I mean, come on now. I was the video game nerd. When you would learn, 25 amazing dinosaur facts. They also have a segment called Technomania. Now, I'll make sure I can get a little bit in focus for you all there. But you might notice an N64 talking about the blast off. Get ready for the 64-bit blast. We know. Every month the video game companies bombard you with systems and games that are bigger, better, and more intense. But we got to tell you about the Nintendo's Ultra 64. Dudes, it was still the Ultra 64. When was this? April 1996? That's the original. It's hard to tell here, but if you want to zoom in on your screen, that's the original, like, all matte black N64 controller with the N64 here. It's the same form factor, but they got this, like, Ultra 64 logo, and, like, it's a logo that almost looks like the Quake logo. And so they're advertising this and giving you secret tips for Donkey Kong Country 2. Like, this was like a gold mine for me, man. Are you kidding me? Like, my parents probably got this subscription for one of those, like, $4 for the entire year, right? And it just, like, fed me with random video game knowledge. There was, one on the N64, and then, October. So from April until October, then the N64 becomes the actual N64 and is no longer the Ultra 64, right? We think the new Nintendo 64 gaming system is kind of mind-blowing. The new games really showed it off. Super Mario 64 is probably our fave. That lovable Italian plumber now in 3D. Oh, and newsflash, I love this shit, man. So, like, it's a little bit of a taste of the times. It's hard to trust your memory on these things. So it's always really interesting when you get into a little bit of this kind of stuff, right? Newsflash, the Sega Saturn and Sony's PlayStation systems are now super cheap. Well, cheaper. You can now score them for a mere $199. Plus, Sega's come out with a new modem accessory, the Sega Saturn Netlink, that lets you surf the net and play games online. To think, right? Like, I recall PlayStation being the ubiquitous thing. A lot of people think it was because it was cheap. The reality was that it was actually a premium thing. With the PS1, you got a CD player on top of the PS1. With the PS2, you got a DVD player on top of it. Down to $199, $200 in $1996 was now the super cheap, right? So it's I I don't know. It's a little bit of like video game history outside of the video games that is like, this is the kind of important context that you get with like Adventure Magazine. Like, and this was not a gaming publication, right? Like, clearly they covered games because it was of interest to their demographic, but I mean, that's not the core of it, right? So to see what do the normies think, basically, is really interesting. Another really interesting one, May 1999. And this is one that I freaking love because, I don't know, I haven't done an extensive search, but I'm pretty sure this is original art from the Disney Adventures staff of both Link holding a Game Boy, an off-brand, clearly not actually the Game Boy, and then like a little like off-model Pikachu as well, but done in the style of like the original Pokemon character art. Usually when you would see these things, and you've seen, like, I'm sure everyone has seen the selection of CG renders of characters that were used in advertisements and in strategy guides and gaming mags and stuff like that. These things, like if you go through Nintendo Power, these were all provided by Nintendo and by the developers for use by all these magazines. So it's always super, super fascinating when you get to some of the ephemera that actually has like original art. And Nintendo Power was fantastic for this because they would commission original art of all these different games. So you can go through the Nintendo Power catalog and see a ton of like phenomenal art. Some done by the father of Rose McGowan, the actress. Just for reference, they did a bunch of the, I believe, Ninja Turtle art for Nintendo Power, as well as the Tetris art. It's this fascinating world of like, it has these little bits of gaming history in it, but you might not see it. So like, I'm curious, if this isn't provided by Nintendo, and this was done by the Disney Adventure staff, like what other stuff did they do? Like, is there a collection of this? Like, how many off-brand but like basically promotional bits are there, right? Like, it's super interesting. This is something that the gaming historian and researcher Frank Cifaldi talks about. Frank Cifaldi formerly of Digital Eclipse, and now runs and it was a founder of the Video Game History Foundation. They do a lot of excellent like video game archaeology, and one of the things they specialize in is the ephemera. It's the stuff like this. It's the flyers you would get. It's the ads in regional retailer magazines, right? Like I'm the ad spreads and the pricing and the information associated with it and release dates, right? Like you could get a sense of, especially in the olden days where you didn't actually have any of this kind of consistency across proper release structures and, delivery. The game might come out and it might take you months until you would see it in your region and pop into stores. It's one of the pieces of information you can use to track down when these games arrived, right? Like there's a lot of talk about Zelda 2 for the NES, and that it wasn't really available in a lot of places for a long time. And so tracking down where the shipments got to first and how that trickled out is all part of the, the legacy of the industry and of games as a whole. So I don't know. Super, super fascinating. And so like I've been digging through these adventure magazines. I found a couple other really cool things too, man. Like there's one of the old Pokemon comic book series, which I picked up on because I was a freaking Pokemon super fan when Red and Blue came out. So just seeing that, right? Seeing different artists take on it from a time before Pokemon was the monolithic entity that it is today. And yeah, you don't see some of the different takes on it and the different approaches to how the franchise was handled anymore because it is so absolutely ginormous, right? Yes, I've absolutely been on an adventure magazine adventure. It has been delightful.